I'm April, and I'm 26 years old. My grandfather's funeral was supposed to be about honoring his memory, but instead it turned into the most humiliating day of my life. I watched my family divide up his empire like vultures while I got handed an envelope with a plane ticket. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt overlooked by your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. The reading of Grandpa Robert's will took place in his lawyer's mahogany-paneled office downtown. My mother Linda sat primly in her black Chanel suit, dabbing her eyes with tissues that hadn't seen a single tear. My father David checked his Rolex repeatedly, already mentally spending his inheritance. My brother Marcus lounged in his chair like he owned the place, and my cousin Jennifer kept whispering calculations to her husband. Mr. Morrison, Grandpa's longtime attorney, cleared his throat and began reading. To my son David Thompson, I leave the family shipping business and all associated assets. Dad's face lit up like Christmas morning. The business was worth $30 million. Easy. To my daughter-in-law Linda Thompson, I bequeath the family estate in Napa Valley, including all furnishings and artwork. Mom actually smiled for the first time since the funeral. The estate was easily worth $25 million. To my grandson Marcus Thompson, I leave my collection of vintage automobiles and the penthouse apartment in Manhattan. Marcus pumped his fist under the table. Those cars alone were worth millions. To my granddaughter Jennifer Davis, I leave my yacht Isabella and the vacation home in Martha's Vineyard. Jennifer squeezed her husband's hand triumphantly. Then Mr. Morrison paused and looked directly at me. My heart hammered as everyone turned to stare. This was it. Grandpa had always been closest to me. He'd taught me chess, taken me sailing, shared stories about building his empire from nothing. Surely he'd left me something significant. To my granddaughter April Thompson, Mr. Morrison continued, I leave this envelope. That's it. An envelope. E. The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Mom actually chuckled and patted my knee condescendingly. Well, honey, I'm sure there's something meaningful inside. Maybe a nice letter. But I could see it in their faces. They thought it was hilarious. Poor April, the granddaughter who'd spent every summer helping Grandpa with his business ventures, who'd listened to his stories about Monaco and Las Vegas, who'd been his chess partner for 15 years, had been left with an envelope while everyone else got millions. Acho que se note amava tanto asim, Mom said, barely containing her laughter as she butchered Portuguese, trying to sound worldly. I guess your grandfather didn't love you that much after all. The words hit me like a physical blow. 26 years of family gatherings, of being the responsible one, of helping everyone with their problems, and this was how they saw me. The afterthought. The leftover. Marcus leaned over, smirking. Maybe it's Monopoly money, sis. That'd be about right for your luck. I clutched the envelope, my hands trembling slightly. Inside, I could feel something besides paper. It wasn't thick enough to be a large check, but there was definitely something there besides a letter. Jennifer piped up from across the room. Don't look so sad, April. I'm sure Grandpa left you something appropriate for your station. Her tone made it clear what she thought my station was. I stood up abruptly, the leather chair creaking behind me. If you'll excuse me, I need some air. The laughter followed me out of the office and down the hall. I could hear Mom telling someone, she's always been dramatic. Robert probably left her a nice little keepsake or some advice about finding a husband. In the elevator, alone except for my reflection in the polished steel doors, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a first-class plane ticket to Monaco, dated for next week, and a single sentence written in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. Trust activated on your 26th birthday, sweetheart. Time to claim what's always been yours. But that wasn't what made my breath catch. It was what else was in the envelope. The second item in the envelope was a business card and a bank statement. The card read, Prince Alexandre de Monaco, Private Secretary, with elegant gold lettering. On the back, in Grandpa's handwriting, he's managing your trust. The bank statement was from Credit Suisse, addressed to April R. Thompson Trust. The balance made me dizzy. $347,000, $347 million. I stared at the numbers, counting zeros again and again. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. This had to be a mistake, some kind of clerical error or cruel joke. But the letterhead was real. The account numbers looked legitimate, and Grandpa's handwriting was unmistakable. When I got back to my apartment that night, I called the bank's international number listed on the statement. After being transferred 3 times and providing extensive verification information, a Swiss banker with impeccable English confirmed what I couldn't believe. Yes, Miss Thompson. Your trust was established when you were 16 and has been professionally managed for the past decade. Your grandfather was quite specific about the activation date coinciding with your 26th birthday. But I never signed anything to create a trust. Your grandfather established it as the settlor. As a minor, your consent wasn't required. The trust has been generating returns and reinvesting profits from various international business holdings. Business holdings. That phrase sent chills down my spine, remembering all those chess games where Grandpa would talk about hypothetical business scenarios, asking my opinion on hotel management, customer service strategies, and market positioning. I'd thought he was just making conversation. What kind of business holdings? I asked. I'm not authorized to discuss specifics over the phone, Miss Thompson. However, Prince Alexandra has been briefed to provide complete details about your assets when you arrive in Monaco. After I hung up, I sat in my tiny apartment staring at the bank statement. The family group text was buzzing with photos of everyone's new inheritances. Marcus had posted pictures of car magazines. Jennifer was already browsing Martha's Vineyard real estate websites. Nobody had even asked what was in my envelope. The next morning at breakfast with Mom and Dad, I made the mistake of mentioning my plans. I'm thinking of taking that trip to Monaco. The ticket Grandpa left me. Dad nearly choked on his coffee. Monaco? Honey, that's probably going to cost you thousands in hotels and expenses. You know your teaching salary can't cover that kind of vacation. I thought about the bank statement hidden in my purse. The ticket is first class, and it's paid for. Mom laughed dismissively. April, sweetie, Monaco is for people like, well, people with real money. You'll be completely out of place. It's all casinos and yacht parties and designer everything. If only they knew. Maybe she could get some good Instagram photos, Marcus suggested sarcastically. Show her students what real wealth looks like before she comes back to her little classroom. I felt my cheeks burning. But now there was something else beneath the embarrassment. Knowledge. Power. The understanding that I wasn't the poor relation they all thought I was. Maybe Grandpa had a reason for sending me there. I said quietly. Oh, honey. Mom sighed dramatically. Your grandfather was 93 years old. His mind wasn't what it used to be toward the end. But I remembered those conversations differently. Grandpa had been sharp as ever, discussing business deals and investments right up until his final week. When he'd talked about Monaco and Las Vegas, it had always been with the familiarity of someone who actually knew those places. That afternoon, I called in sick to work and spent hours researching. Prince Alexandre de Monaco was real, legitimate, and according to financial publications, managed several $billion in international investments for high-net-worth families. I was apparently one of those families now. The night before my flight, I packed my best dresses and every bit of confidence I could muster. Mom called one last time to try to talk me out of it. April, you're making a mistake. You could use that ticket for something practical. The ticket's non-refundable, Mom. Well then, at least promise me you won't embarrass yourself. Don't tell people you're Robert Thompson's granddaughter and expect special treatment. I hung up without promising anything. As I double-checked my luggage, I caught my reflection in the mirror. 26 years old, brown hair, average height, nothing particularly special about me according to my family. But Grandpa had seen something different. He'd always told me I had his eyes, his instincts for business, his stubborn determination. Tomorrow, I'd find out if he was right. The first-class cabin of the Air France flight to Monaco was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The flight attendant addressed me as Miss Thompson with genuine warmth, offered me champagne before takeoff, and made sure I had everything I needed for the 11-hour journey. As we flew over the Atlantic, I tried to process what the bank statement really meant. $347 million wasn't just money. It was power, security, freedom. It was the ability to never worry about rent or car payments or student loans ever again. At the nice airport, I expected to catch a taxi to Monaco. Instead, as I wheeled my luggage through customs, I saw a man in a crisp black suit holding a sign with my name. Not just April or Miss Thompson, but Miss April Thompson, beneficiary of Thompson International Trust. My legs nearly gave out. The driver was polite but formal, loading my luggage into a pristine black Mercedes. As we drove along the coastal highway toward Monaco, he made conversation in accented English. Is this your first visit to the Principality, Miss Thompson? Yes, I managed. It's beautiful. His Serene Highness is looking forward to meeting you. He has been managing your trust's Monaco holdings personally for several years. Monaco Holdings. Plural. Monaco announced itself gradually. First, the famous harbor came into view, packed with yachts that cost more than most people's houses. Then the Monte Carlo Casino, its ornate facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. Finally, we climbed winding streets lined with luxury boutiques and cafes. The palace sat at the top of the hill, But we didn't go to the main entrance. Instead, the driver guided the Mercedes through a side gate and into a private courtyard I'd seen in magazines but never imagined visiting. "Miss Thompson," the driver said as he helped me from the car, "if you would follow me." We walked through corridors lined with paintings that belonged in museums. My teaching salary had never prepared me for spaces like this. Everything whispered of old money, real power, centuries of influence. Finally, we stopped outside an ornate door. The driver knocked twice, then opened it for me. "Miss Thompson," he announced, "your appointment." I stepped into what could only be described as a private office, though it was larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Mediterranean. Behind a massive desk sat a man who looked exactly like his photos, Prince Alexandre de Monaco. He rose as I entered, coming around the desk to greet me. Tall, impeccably dressed in a navy suit, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to prove yourself to anyone. "Miss Thompson?" he said, extending his hand. His accent was subtle, cultured. "I am Alexandra. Thank you for coming." I shook his hand, acutely aware of how out of place I must look. "Your Highness, I have so many questions." He smiled warmly. "Please call me Alexandre, and I have many answers. Your grandfather was not only a dear friend, but one of the most strategic investors I've ever known." He gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "Miss Thompson, your grandfather began planning your financial future when you were still a child. He established the Thompson International Trust when you were 16, with very specific instructions about your education, both formal and practical." Practical education? All those conversations about business, about reading people, about thinking strategically. He wasn't just sharing stories with you, April. He was training you. Alexandra opened a thick folder on his desk. "Your trust currently holds controlling interests in several major properties. The Monte Carlo Bay Resort and Casino, which generates approximately 40 million euros annually. The Belmont Grand Casino and Resort in Las Vegas, producing roughly $145 million per year. Commercial real estate in London, Tokyo, and Sydney." I stared at him, my mouth slightly open. "Your grandfather also made sure all tax obligations were properly managed through the trust structure. You've been receiving a modest stipend of $60,000 annually, enough to live comfortably as a teacher, but not enough to attract attention. The money in my savings account? Distributed from your trust, though you weren't aware of the source. Your grandfather wanted you to learn the value of work and ordinary life before you understood your true financial position." Everything was clicking into place. Why I'd always been able to afford my apartment despite a teacher's salary. Why I never stressed about money the way my colleagues did. Why Grandpa had always seemed so confident about my future. "Alexandra," I said slowly, "how much am I actually worth?" He consulted another document. "As of this morning, the trust's net value is approximately $1.2 billion. I gripped the arms of my chair to keep from falling over. "You're a billionaire, April. You always have been." I spent the rest of the afternoon in Alexandra's office, reviewing documents that proved everything he'd told me. Trust agreements, property deeds, financial statements, tax filings, all managed by teams of professionals I'd never heard of, all working on behalf of a trust I'd never known existed. "Your grandfather was very specific about the timing," Alexandra explained, as I flipped through page after page of legal documents. "He wanted you to experience normal life, to understand work and responsibility, before you learned about your inheritance." "But why hide it? Why not just tell me?" Alexandra smiled sadly. "Because he knew your family. He knew that if they understood your true inheritance, they would treat you differently. Either they would resent you, or they would try to control you, or they would see you only as a source of money rather than as a person." I thought about the will reading, about their laughter, about Mom's cruel comment. They'd shown their true colors perfectly. "Your grandfather wanted you to see how they really felt about you before you gained the power to change the dynamic," Alexandra continued. "He said you needed to understand who truly cared about you versus who would care about your money. And now? Now you decide how to use what you've always owned." That evening, Alexandra arranged for me to tour the Monte Carlo Bay Resort. As the general manager, Claude Dubois, showed me through my property, I kept having to remind myself that I wasn't a tourist. I was the owner. The resort was magnificent. 300 luxury suites, 5 restaurants, a casino floor that buzzed with activity, a spa that looked like something from a movie. Everything was pristine, profitable, and completely surreal. "The property has maintained 94% occupancy for the past 3 years," Claude explained as we stood on the presidential suite's terrace. "Your grandfather, or rather, your trust, has been an excellent owner. Very hands-off, but always supportive of quality improvements. My grandfather managed this remotely, through video conferences with your advisory team. He was remarkably knowledgeable about hospitality operations for someone who'd never worked in the industry. But he had worked in the industry, I realized. Through me, all those conversations about customer service, about what makes people feel welcome, about balancing luxury with comfort he'd been learning from my perspective as someone who understood what ordinary people wanted from extraordinary experiences. Back in my five-star hotel that night, I called my family. The group text was still buzzing with excitement about their inheritances. Marcus had made an offer on a condo in Miami. Jennifer was planning to quit her job and become a lifestyle influencer. I almost laughed. They were excited about millions while I owned billions. But what struck me wasn't the money, it was understanding that Grandpa had protected me. While they'd received immediate gratification, he'd given me something far more valuable, the chance to discover my own strength before I needed to use it. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "How's the vacation going? Hope you're not spending too much money." I looked around my presidential suite, at the harbor view that stretched to the horizon, at the bottle of champagne that cost more than his monthly car payment. "It's educational," I texted back. The next morning, Alexandra arranged for the company jet to take me to Las Vegas. As I settled into the leather seats of an airplane I apparently owned, I thought about what I wanted to do with this knowledge. I could go home and reveal everything immediately, shock them with the truth, make them feel foolish for underestimating me. Or I could be strategic. I could use what Grandpa had taught me about thinking several moves ahead. As the jet climbed into the sky above Monaco, I made my decision. It was time to play chess. The Belmont Grand Casino and Resort in Las Vegas was even more impressive than Monaco. 47 floors of gleaming gold and glass, rising from the strip like a monument to success. My monument? Apparently. Sarah Chen, the Vegas property manager, met me at the airport with the kind of limousine that would have made my family's jaws drop. She was sharp, professional, and completely unaware that she was talking to her actual boss. "Miss Thompson," she said as we settled into the limo's leather seats, "your trust's representative said you wanted a comprehensive tour of the property. I'm excited to show you what we've built here. How long have you been managing the property?" 7 years now. It's been incredible watching it grow. Your trust has been the ideal owner, supportive of innovation, but smart about risk management. As we toured the resort, Sarah showed me financial reports that made my head spin. The casino floor generated about 60% of revenue. The hotel, restaurants, and entertainment venues contributed the rest. Everything was meticulously managed, profitable, and growing. "Your trust has been talking about expansion," Sarah mentioned as we sat in the penthouse suite that I apparently owned. "There's interest in acquiring similar properties in Dubai and Singapore." "Really?" I tried to sound casual. "What kind of timeline?" "Nothing concrete yet, but the preliminary research is promising. Your financial team seems confident about international expansion." My financial team. I had a financial team. That afternoon, I spent 3 hours on video calls with advisors I'd never met, but who'd been managing my money for years. My CPA, who'd been filing my tax returns and maintaining the legal fiction that I was just a teacher receiving modest trust distributions. My investment manager, who'd grown my portfolio from hundreds of millions to over $1 billion. My legal team, who'd structured everything to withstand scrutiny and protect my privacy. "Miss Thompson," my lead advisor explained, "your grandfather left very specific instructions about how to handle your financial awakening. He anticipated you might want to make some significant moves once you understood your position." "What kind of moves?" "He thought you might be interested in strategic acquisitions, particularly in markets where you have personal knowledge or family connections." Family connections. An idea began forming in my mind. That evening, I had dinner with Sarah at the resort's signature restaurant. As we ate food that cost more per bite than I used to spend on entire meals, I asked casual questions about business acquisitions. "Hypothetically," I said, "if someone wanted to acquire a small shipping company worth around $30 million, how would that work?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. $30 million is pocket change for a trust your size. We could structure that through existing corporate entities, complete the acquisition within 30 days. Is this hypothetical shipping company interesting for some reason? I thought about Dad's company, about how he'd struggled with debt and expansion costs, about how a cash infusion could solve all his problems while giving me control of the business I'd grown up hearing about. "It might be," I said carefully. When I called Alexandra later that night, he listened thoughtfully as I outlined my idea. "You want to acquire your father's company? I want to save it. Dad's been struggling with cash flow issues since the expansion. He's too proud to ask for help. But if the right buyer came along with the right offer, and you think you're the right buyer?" I think I'm the only buyer who actually cares whether the employees keep their jobs and whether the company maintains the culture Dad built. Alexandra was quiet for a moment. April, this would be your first major business decision as a billionaire. Are you certain you want it to involve your family? My family doesn't know it involves me. To them, it would just be a generous offer from foreign investors. And you're comfortable with that deception? I thought about their laughter at the will reading, about their assumptions about my worth, about their casual dismissal of my intelligence and capabilities. For now, I said, yes. The next morning, I flew back to Portland with a plan. I'd give my family one more chance to see me as I really was. If they continued to underestimate me, well, I'd show them exactly what underestimation cost. Back in Portland, I sat in my small apartment reviewing financial reports from properties around the world, while my family remained completely oblivious to who I'd become. The contrast was almost surreal. I'd spent the morning on a video call with my Dubai acquisition team, discussing a resort purchase that would cost more than my entire family's combined inheritance. Now I was getting ready for dinner at my parents' house, where they'd probably ask if I'd spent too much money on my vacation. The family dinner was tonight, and Mom had specifically requested that I bring my laptop to help with basic administrative work related to everyone's inheritances. She'd said I was good with computers and could help organize their financial planning. If she only knew what kind of financial planning I'd been doing lately. I'd spent the afternoon having my lawyers prepare a preliminary acquisition offer for Thompson Maritime. The research was troubling. Dad's company was more vulnerable than I'd realized. He'd taken on significant debt for the fleet expansion. And while the business was profitable, it was cash poor and over-leveraged. A determined buyer could force a sale pretty easily. My phone rang. Sarah from Vegas. April, the Thompson Maritime analysis is complete. The company is exactly what you described, profitable but financially stressed. Our offer could solve their cash flow problems immediately while giving you a solid regional shipping operation. What kind of timeline are we looking at? We could present an offer next week. Anonymous, of course, through one of our existing shell companies. Clean transaction, generous terms, no obvious connection to you. And if they refuse? Honestly, they can't afford to refuse. The company needs capital injection within the next 6 months, or they'll be forced to sell assets or take on even more debt. After I hung up, I sat staring out my apartment window toward my parents' neighborhood. Part of me felt guilty about what I was planning, but a larger part of me remembered every family gathering where I'd been overlooked. Every assumption that I wasn't smart enough for business discussions every time they'd treated me like the family charity case. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, the whole family was already there. Marcus was scrolling through luxury car websites on his tablet. Jennifer was showing Mom photos of Martha's Vineyard renovation ideas. Dad was reading financial news, probably researching investment strategies for his $30 million windfall. April, Jennifer called when she saw me. There's our little world traveler. How was Monaco? Did you take lots of pictures? It was educational, I said, settling into my usual spot at the dining room table. I still can't believe you actually went, Marcus said without looking up from his tablet. That place is for people with serious money. Must have been awkward being around all those millionaires. You adapt, I replied mildly. Dad raised his wine glass. Well, let's toast to Robert's legacy. He certainly provided well for the family. Everyone raised their glasses except me. I just sat there, hands folded, watching them celebrate inheritances that were a fraction of what I controlled. April? Mom prompted. Your glass? I'm fine, thanks. Someone should stay clear-headed for the administrative work. Good thinking, Dad approved. Always practical, our April. As they discussed their plans, Marcus buying cars, Jennifer quitting her job, Mom renovating the Napa estate, I found myself studying them with new eyes. These weren't evil people. They were just people who'd never seen me clearly, who'd made assumptions based on limited information. The question was, what would they do when the information changed? The shipping company is doing well, Dad reported during dessert. Robert's investment in new vessels really positioned us for growth. We're looking at expanding routes, maybe acquiring smaller competitors. How's the cash flow situation? I asked casually. Dad looked surprised that I'd asked a business question. Well, it's manageable. We've got some debt from the expansion, but the revenue projections look good. What about working capital? Reserve funds for unexpected expenses? Now everyone was staring at me. April, Mom said with a laugh. You don't need to worry about business details. That's your father's expertise. I'm just curious. Grandpa always said cash flow was the most important metric for any business. We're fine, Dad said, though I noticed his jaw tighten slightly. The company is stable, but I'd seen the financial reports. They weren't fine. They were surviving month to month, one major client loss away from serious trouble. After dinner, as I helped clear dishes, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Honey, I know you're trying to be involved, but you don't need to ask your father difficult questions about his business. It's not really your area." I almost laughed. Not my area? I owned businesses that generated more profit in a month than Dad's company made in a year. Of course, Mom. I was just making conversation. I know, sweetie, but leave the business talk to the business people, okay? As I drove home that night, I called my acquisition team. Present the offer Monday morning. Generous terms, fast timeline, all cash. And if they have questions about the buyer, I smiled as I pulled into my parking space. Tell them the European investors prefer to maintain privacy, but are very interested in supporting American maritime businesses. It wasn't exactly a lie. Have you ever been in a situation where your family completely underestimated your abilities? How did that feel? Share your experiences in the comments below. You'll want to see what happens when April's family realizes who they're really dealing with. The offer arrived on a Tuesday morning. Dad called me at school during my lunch break, his voice tight with stress. "April, something unexpected happened with the company. We received a buyout offer this morning from some international investment group, completely out of nowhere." I put on my most concerned voice. "Is that good or bad?" "I don't know. It's a really good offer. Almost too good." I could hear papers shuffling. "But I don't understand why they want us. We're not that big in the grand scheme of things." "What does your lawyer say?" "That's the thing, they want an answer by Friday. Professional investors don't usually work with such tight timelines unless they're serious." "Maybe they see potential you don't see," I suggested innocently. "Maybe. Look, can you come to dinner Thursday? I want the whole family to discuss this together. You've always been good with details, and I could use another perspective." Another perspective? If only he knew whose perspective he was really asking for. Thursday's dinner was completely different from the previous week. The mood was focused, almost tense. Dad had spread financial documents across the dining room table like he was planning a military campaign. "The offer is $45 million, Dad announced as we gathered around. "That's 30% above the company's book value." Marcus looked up from his phone. $45 million? That's crazy, take it." "It's not that simple," Dad replied. "If I sell the company, what do I do then? It's been my life for 30 years. "You retire," Jennifer suggested. "Travel, relax, enjoy the money." "I'm 58. Too young to retire, too old to start over in a new industry." I studied the offer documents carefully, making sure my expression showed appropriate concern rather than the satisfaction I felt. The terms were exactly what I had instructed, generous enough to tempt them, structured to solve their cash flow problems, but not so excessive as to raise suspicions. "Who is this company?" I asked, pointing to the letterhead. "Neptune International Holdings?" "Swiss-based investment firm," Dad said. "Very legitimate, according to our research. They specialize in maritime and logistics acquisitions." "What's their timeline for integration? Employee retention policies? Management structure changes?" I continued reading through the detailed terms. Everyone stared at me again. "April," Mom said slowly, "those are very specific questions for someone who doesn't work in business." "Grandpa always talked about reading the fine print," I replied, not looking up from the documents. "These terms are actually quite good. They're offering to retain all current employees for at least 3 years, maintain current management structure, and preserve operational independence." "How do you know what constitutes good terms?" Marcus asked suspiciously. I shrugged. "I read financial news sometimes. Business strategy is interesting when you think about it analytically." Dad was studying me with a new expression. "April, you're asking better questions than my business attorney did." Maybe I inherited more of Grandpa's business sense than anyone realized. The conversation continued for another hour, but I could see Dad's resolve wavering. He wanted someone to tell him not to sell, to validate his emotional attachment to the company he'd built. But the offer was too good, the terms too attractive, the financial relief too necessary. "I think I have to accept," he said finally. "It's too much money to pass up. And honestly, the stress of managing cash flow has been keeping me awake at night." "Are you sure?" Mom asked. "The offer expires Friday at 5 p.m. If I don't take it, I might never see an opportunity like this again." After dinner, I lingered in the kitchen helping Mom with dishes while the others moved to the living room. "Your father seems relieved," Mom observed. "I think the business has been more stressful than he let on." "Sometimes selling at the right time is the smartest business decision," I replied, carefully drying a wine glass. "You were very insightful tonight, asking those questions. Very mature business thinking. Maybe you should consider a career change eventually. I nearly dropped the glass. You think I could work in business? Well, not immediately. But maybe someday. You've always been smart, April. Maybe too smart for elementary education. Too smart for teaching? This from the woman who'd laughed at my inheritance 2 weeks ago? I'll think about it, I said neutrally. Friday afternoon at 4:47 p.m., Dad signed the papers. By 5:15 p.m., he owned $45 million and no longer owned Thompson Maritime. By 5:30 p.m., I owned the company my father had just sold me. I celebrated quietly in my apartment while Sarah called from Vegas to confirm the transaction had completed smoothly. The paperwork is all filed, she reported. Thompson Maritime is now a subsidiary of Neptune International Holdings, which is controlled by your trust. What are your operational plans? Keep everything exactly as is, I said. Same employees, same management, same day-to-day operations. I want nothing to change from an external perspective. And the former owner? He doesn't need to know who the ultimate buyer is. Not yet. Understood. Anything else? I looked out my apartment window toward my parents' neighborhood. Actually, yes. I want to start looking at residential real estate in Portland. Something significant. How significant? The kind of house that makes a statement. The next morning, Dad called to invite the family to a celebration lunch. We should toast new beginnings, he said. This feels like the start of a new chapter. New beginnings, I agreed. I like the sound of that. As I got ready for lunch, I caught myself smiling in the mirror. Dad thought he'd sold his company to faceless foreign investors. He had no idea he'd actually sold it to his daughter. The daughter he'd underestimated for 26 years. The daughter who was just getting started. What do you think will happen next? Will April reveal her true identity, or does she have bigger plans in store? Drop your predictions in the comments below. The celebration lunch was at the country club where Dad had been a member for 15 years. As we sat at their best table with champagne flowing, I felt like I was watching a play where I knew the ending but the other actors didn't. To smart business decisions, Dad toasted, raising his glass, and to Robert's legacy, he always said the shipping business would evolve, and maybe this sale proves he was right. To Grandpa, I added quietly, for teaching us about recognizing opportunities. Everyone drank to that, though I noticed Dad's expression grow thoughtful. You know, he said slowly, your grandfather always pushed me to think bigger, expand internationally. He said regional shipping was too limiting. Maybe selling to these international investors is exactly what he would have wanted. Marcus was already planning Dad's windfall spending. You should buy a yacht, Dad. Something nice for Florida waters. Or you could reinvest wisely, I suggested casually. Real estate markets are strong right now. Property values in good locations tend to appreciate consistently. Jennifer laughed. Listen to April giving investment advice. Next, she'll be telling us about market timing and portfolio diversification. I might know a little about investment strategy, I said with a small smile. The conversation flowed around me, but I was only half listening. My phone had been buzzing all morning with updates from property managers across 3 continents. The Singapore resort acquisition was moving forward ahead of schedule. The London commercial real estate portfolio had appreciated 12% in 6 months. My net worth was approaching $1.3 billion. Meanwhile, my family was celebrating Dad's $45 million windfall. After lunch, I drove past the Thompson Maritime offices, my shipping company now, though nobody knew it yet. I parked across the street and watched employees coming and going, people who now worked for me without knowing it. My phone rang. Alexandra. How are you feeling about your first major acquisition? Satisfied? I admitted. I thought I might feel guilty, but mostly I feel vindicated. No regrets about the secrecy? None. If they knew I was the buyer, they'd either demand special treatment or assume I was just playing with inherited money. This way, they have to respect the business decision on its own merits. And your next move? I looked at the building where Dad had worked for 30 years, the business he'd built with Grandpa's guidance, the company that was now part of my international holdings. I think it's time to accelerate things. I want to buy a house. Any particular house? The biggest, most impressive house in Portland. Something that makes people ask questions. Alexandra chuckled. Feeling ready to raise your profile? Feeling ready to stop hiding. That afternoon, I contacted Patricia Wells, Portland's top luxury real estate agent. When I told her my budget range, her entire demeanor shifted from polite professionalism to focused attention. Miss Thompson, may I ask what line of work you're in? International business, real estate and hospitality investments. And you're looking to relocate to Portland permanently? I'm considering it. I have family connections here. We spent the afternoon touring properties that cost more than my parents' neighborhood. $10 million estates with home theaters and wine cellars, $12 million mansions with guest houses larger than most family homes, a $15 million compound with its own private lake. This is our crown jewel, Patricia said as we pulled up to the final property. The Westfield estate. $18 million, but the location and views are unparalleled. The house was stunning. Situated on 20 acres overlooking the city, it was the kind of property that appeared in architectural magazines. As we toured the grounds, I realized you could see my parents' entire neighborhood from the master bedroom windows. Perfect. I'll take it, I said. Patricia nearly dropped her tablet. I'm sorry? The Westfield estate. I want to make an offer. Don't you want to think about it? Discuss financing? Review comparable sales? Cash purchase, full asking price. Close within 2 weeks. Patricia stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Miss Thompson, this is an $18 million property. Yes, I can count. I pulled out my phone and called David, my financial advisor. David, I need you to wire $18 million for a real estate purchase. As I gave David the wire instructions, Patricia stood there with her mouth slightly open. I could practically see her recalculating everything she thought she knew about me. After I hung up, she found her voice. Miss Thompson, may I ask, what exactly do you do in international business? I own things, I said simply. Hotels, casinos, shipping companies, that sort of thing. Hotels and casinos? Among other investments. That evening, I had dinner with my parents in their modest kitchen while my phone confirmed the wire transfer for a house worth more than their wildest inheritance dreams. How was your day, honey? Mom asked. Productive, I said. I looked at some real estate options. Oh, thinking of upgrading from your apartment? Something like that. Dad was reading business news on his tablet, still processing the sale of his company. You know what's interesting? The firm that bought Thompson Maritime has been acquiring shipping companies all along the West Coast. This wasn't a random purchase, it was part of a larger consolidation strategy. I kept my expression neutral. Maybe they see opportunities in the maritime industry that others are missing. Maybe. But it makes me wonder if I sold too cheaply. If they're building a regional network, maybe my company was worth more than I thought. You got an excellent price. Dad, don't second-guess a good business decision. I suppose it's just... He paused. Your grandfather always said consolidation was inevitable in shipping. Maybe these foreign investors are the ones making it happen. If only he knew that his father's granddaughter was the foreign investor. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Wire received. Congratulations on your new estate. I smiled and put my phone away. Tomorrow, I'd start moving into the most expensive house in Portland. Time to stop being invisible. Moving day arrived exactly 2 weeks later. I'd hired the most expensive moving company in Portland, the kind that relocated tech executives and celebrities. As the trucks pulled up to my new estate, I called Mom. I'm moving today. Oh, that's nice, honey. Did you find a bigger apartment? Something like that. You should come see it. Of course. After your father finishes his conference call, we'll drive over. What's the address? I gave her the Westfield estate address, then hung up and waited. The estate looked even more impressive with professional movers carrying in furniture I'd ordered from Milan, artwork I'd acquired in London, and the few personal items I'd kept from my old life. I stood on the circular driveway, directing placement of a sculpture that cost more than most people's annual salaries, when my phone rang. Dad. April. His voice was strange, tight. Did you give your mother the wrong address? No. Why? Because she's standing in front of the Westfield estate. You know, the $18 million mansion that just sold to some mystery buyer. I smiled at my reflection in the enormous front windows. I'm not in front of it, Dad. I'm in it. Silence. April, that's not funny. I'm not joking. More silence. Then, we're coming up the driveway. I watched from the grand foyer as my parents' modest Toyota pulled up behind a moving truck that cost more than their car. Through the tall windows, I could see them sitting in their vehicle, staring at the house like it might disappear if they moved too quickly. When they finally got out of the car, they approached the front door like people in a dream. I opened it and waited. April. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Hi, Mom. Dad. Welcome to my new home. They stepped inside slowly, their eyes taking in the marble floors, the crystal chandelier, the staircase that curved up to the second floor like something from a palace. April, Dad said carefully, how exactly did you buy this house? I made an offer. They accepted. An $18 million offer? Actually, $19 million. There was a bidding war. Mom grabbed Dad's arm for support. Honey, this isn't possible. You're a teacher. Teachers don't buy houses like this. Former teacher, I corrected. I resigned yesterday. I led them through the house, watching their faces as we toured rooms larger than their entire first floor. The kitchen with imported Italian marble countertops. The library with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The wine cellar stocked with bottles that cost more than their monthly mortgage payment. April, Dad said as we stood in the master bedroom looking out at the view that included their neighborhood far below. You need to explain this. Right now. Explain what? How you bought this house. Where the money came from. What's really going on? I walked to the window and looked down at the city spread out below us. From up here, their problems seemed very small indeed. Remember Grandpa's envelope? The letter? April, there's no way a letter explains this house. I turned to face them. It wasn't just a letter. Then what was it? A plane ticket to Monaco, and notification that my trust had been activated. They stared at me blankly. Grandpa established a trust for me when I was 16. I've been a billionaire since my 26th birthday, which was last month. Dad sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. That's impossible. Grandpa bought properties around the world and put them in my name through the trust. I own casinos in Monaco and Las Vegas, hotels in London and Singapore, commercial real estate across 3 continents. The envelope you all laughed at? It made me rich enough to buy anything I want. Billionaire? Mom whispered. $1.3 billion, actually. As of yesterday's market close. The silence stretched on forever. Finally, Dad found his voice. If this is true, if you really have that kind of money, then why didn't you tell us? I almost laughed. Tell you? When? During the will reading when you were all laughing at my envelope? When Mom made that cruel comment about Grandpa not loving me? When you asked me to help with basic administrative work because I was good with computers? We didn't mean... Yes, you did. My voice was calm, but I could feel years of hurt crystallizing into something harder. You meant every word. You thought I was the leftover, the one who didn't matter, the one who got nothing while everyone else got millions. April, we're sorry. For what? For showing me exactly who you are? For proving that you only value people based on their bank accounts? Dad stood up, his businessman instincts finally kicking in. Okay, let's discuss this rationally. If you have this kind of wealth, there are family considerations, tax implications, trust structures. We should talk about how to handle this responsibly. And there it was, the real reason for their sudden concern. Actually, Dad, there is something we should discuss. I pulled out my phone and opened an email. I acquired something recently that you might find interesting. What? Thompson Maritime, Neptune International Holdings, the foreign investment firm that bought your company? That's my shell company. I bought your shipping business. His face went pale. You bought my company? For $45 million, which was quite generous considering the debt load and cash flow issues. Why would you do that? Because I could. Because I wanted to. Because you sold it without even wondering if anyone in the family might be interested in keeping it. April, Mom said desperately. This is insane. You can't just buy your father's company. I can, and I did. It's mine now. Completely. Dad's face was cycling through emotions I'd never seen before. Shock, anger, confusion, and something that looked like fear. Give it back, he said finally. I'm sorry? The company. Sell it back to me. I shook my head. It's not for sale. April, that company is my life's work. Was your life's work. Now it's my business investment. I moved toward the door. I think you should both go home and process this. We can talk more when you're ready to have a real conversation. We're not leaving until you explain how you're going to fix this. I stopped and turned back to them. Fix what? I bought a company from a willing seller at above market price. I moved into a house I paid cash for. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. April, Dad's voice broke slightly. Please. For a moment looking at his face, I felt a flicker of the old April, the one who wanted everyone to be happy, who hated conflict, who would have done anything to fix things. But then I remembered the laughter during the will reading, the dismissive comments, the assumption that I was worthless. I'll see you both soon, I said gently, when you're ready to treat me like family instead of like hired help. After they left, I stood alone in my magnificent house, looking out at the view that cost $19 million. My phone was buzzing with congratulations from property managers, updates from financial advisors, and requests for meetings from business contacts. But for the first time since opening Grandpa's envelope, I felt completely, perfectly alone. And surprisingly, that felt exactly right. 3 days later, Marcus called. His voice was tight with anger and something that might have been panic. What the hell is going on, April? Good morning to you too, Marcus. Don't play dumb. Mom and Dad told me everything. About the house, about the companies, about you buying Dad's business. Is any of it true? I was sitting on my terrace drinking coffee that cost more per pound than Marcus earned in a week, looking out over a view that still took my breath away every morning. Which part are you asking about? All of it. Are you really some secret billionaire? I'm not secret anymore. This is insane. How is this even possible? Grandpa loved me more than you realized. Bullshit. He left you an envelope just like the rest of us saw. He left me an empire. The envelope was just the notification. There was a long pause. April, we need to have a family meeting. All of us. Tonight. We had a family meeting. It was called the will reading. Remember? When you all thought my inheritance was hilarious? That was before you knew I had money? Interesting how that changes everything. April, come on. We're family. Are we? Because for 26 years, family meant you got the spotlight and I got ignored. What's changed besides my net worth? Everything's changed. You can't just buy Dad's company and move into some mansion and expect us to what, Marcus? To treat me with respect? To include me in decisions? To stop assuming I'm worthless? I set down my coffee cup. I'm not expecting anything from you anymore. I've learned not to. Fine. You want to play hardball? I'll call our lawyers. If Grandpa left you all this money through some kind of fraud or elder abuse, I actually laughed. Marcus, I have the best legal team money can buy. They've already reviewed every aspect of the trust structure. Do you really want to spend the next 5 years in court battles you can't afford to win? You wouldn't. Try me. He hung up. An hour later, Jennifer called. Then Mom again. Then Dad. All variations of the same conversation: shock, anger, demands for explanations, threats of legal action, and eventually, grudging requests for family meetings. I ignored them all and spent the afternoon touring commercial real estate with Patricia. If I was going to live in Portland permanently, I might as well make some local investments. That evening, I was in my wine cellar selecting a bottle for dinner when my security system chimed. The front gate camera showed all 4 of them, Mom, Dad, Marcus, and Jennifer, standing at my entrance like some kind of intervention squad. I pressed the intercom button. Can I help you? April, it's your family. Mom's voice came through the speaker. We need to talk. Did you make an appointment? April, don't be ridiculous. We're your family. The family that laughed at me, dismissed me, and threatened me with lawsuits today? That family? Please. Dad's voice now. Let us in. We can work this out. I considered it. Part of me, the old part that had always craved their approval, wanted to open the gates and try to fix everything. But the new part, the part that had learned her own worth, knew better. I'll make you a deal, I said finally. You can come in, but we do this my way. You listen without interrupting. You don't make demands. You don't threaten me. And you acknowledge that everything I own legitimately through a trust my grandfather established. Silence. Otherwise, you can go home and we'll talk when you're ready to be civil. More silence. Then Dad. Okay, your way. I opened the gates and waited in the foyer as they drove up the circular driveway. When they walked through my front door, I could see them trying not to stare at the chandelier, the marble floors, the staircase that belonged in a palace. I led them to the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city lights beginning to twinkle in the evening darkness. I took the chair that faced them all, while they arranged themselves on the sofa like defendants waiting for judgment. So, I said, crossing my legs and settling back. What did you want to discuss? Dad cleared his throat. April, we owe you an apology. For what specifically? For not understanding the situation with your inheritance. For not realizing what Robert had done for you. That's not what you need to apologize for. What do you mean? You're apologizing for being wrong about my inheritance. You're not apologizing for treating me badly. Mom leaned forward. Honey, we never treated you badly. We love you. Do you? Because love isn't what I felt during that will reading. Love isn't asking me to do administrative work while you planned how to spend millions. Love isn't laughing when someone suggests that Grandpa didn't care about me. We were shocked, Jennifer said defensively. We didn't handle it well. You handled it exactly how you always handle things involving me. You assumed I was less important, less capable, less deserving. Marcus had been quiet, but now he spoke up. Okay, fine. We screwed up. We're sorry. But April, you bought Dad's company. That's not normal family behavior. Normal family behavior would have been asking if I wanted to be involved before selling it to strangers. Normal family behavior would have been including me in discussions about Grandpa's legacy. Normal family behavior would have been treating me like I mattered. So this is revenge? Dad asked. No, this is business. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the view that stretched for miles. I bought a profitable company from a willing seller at a fair price. I moved into a house I could afford. I'm living my life on my terms for the first time ever. What do you want from us? Mom asked quietly. I turned back to face them. I want you to understand that April, the overlooked granddaughter, doesn't exist anymore. April, the billionaire businesswoman, does. And she doesn't need your approval, your permission, or your acceptance. April, Dad said desperately, I need that company back. It's my legacy, everything I've worked for. Then you shouldn't have sold it. I didn't know you were interested. You never asked. The room fell silent. Outside, Portland spread out below us like a map of infinite possibilities. Inside, my family sat with the uncomfortable realization that the power dynamic had shifted permanently and irreversibly. There is one thing, I said finally. They all looked up, hopefully. I want a public acknowledgement. All of you. For the way you treated me at the will reading, for the assumptions you made, for the disrespect you showed. A public acknowledgement? Jennifer asked. Social media posts, local newspaper if necessary. Wherever you announced your own inheritances, I want you to acknowledge that you were wrong about mine. That's humiliating, Marcus said. Good. Now you know how I felt. And if we do this? Dad asked carefully. Will you consider selling me back the company? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'll consider it. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even a maybe. But it was hope. And sometimes, hope is the most powerful currency of all. A week later, the public acknowledgments began appearing. Dad's was published in the business section of the Oregonian. David Thompson acknowledges that he significantly underestimated his daughter April's business acumen and inheritance. Ms. Thompson has proven herself to be a sophisticated investor and businesswoman, and I deeply regret any dismissive comments I may have made about her capabilities. Mom's Facebook post was more personal, but equally public. I want to apologize to my daughter April for comments I made that suggested her grandfather didn't care about her. I was completely wrong, and I'm sorry for any pain my words caused. April is an accomplished businesswoman who deserves respect and recognition. Marcus and Jennifer's Instagram posts were briefer, but still satisfying acknowledgments that they'd misjudged me. The posts generated significant attention. Local business journalists started asking questions about the mysterious April Thompson, who'd apparently emerged from nowhere as a major player. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, which I politely declined. As for Thompson Maritime, I'd surprised everyone by keeping Dad on as general manager. Same office, same responsibilities, same day-to-day operations. The only difference was that he now reported to a management company that reported to a holding company that was ultimately controlled by me. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. But the real surprise came 6 months later, at a family gathering I'd agreed to attend at Mom and Dad's house. The atmosphere was different, more respectful, more careful, but also more genuine than it had been in years. April, Dad said during dessert, I have something to tell you about the company. I looked up from my wine. What about it? The new ownership structure. It's actually been incredible. Having access to capital, being part of a larger shipping network, not having to worry about debt service. It's let me focus on what I do best instead of constant financial stress. The employees seem happier too, I observed. They are. Job security, better benefits, clear growth opportunities. I should have sold years ago, but I was too proud to admit I was in over my head. Mom was watching this exchange carefully. April, can I ask you something? Of course. When you bought the company, did you do it to hurt your father or to help him? I considered the question. Both, honestly. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to have important decisions made without his input, but I also couldn't stand the thought of all those employees losing their jobs if the company failed. And now? Now it's just business. Good business, as it turns out. Marcus, who'd been quieter than usual all evening, finally spoke up. April, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. Okay. Are you happy, really happy, with all this money and power and this new life? I thought about it. I'm content. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I want to be, doing exactly what I want to do, with people who see me for who I really am. And us? Jennifer asked. Where do we fit in your new life? That depends on you, I said simply. I'm not the same person who sat at this table 6 months ago hoping for your approval. I don't need you to like me anymore, but I'd like to have a real relationship with you if you're interested in getting to know who I actually am. Dad leaned forward. April, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but could you teach me? About business? About thinking strategically the way your grandfather did? I've spent 30 years running a company, but watching how you've handled everything, I realize I never really understood business at all. I smiled, and this time it was genuine. I'd like that, Dad. Later that evening, as I drove home to my estate in the hills, I called Alexander. How are you feeling about your new family dynamic? Different. Better, I think. More honest, certainly. And personally? Are you happy with the choices you've made? I pulled into my circular driveway and looked up at the house that had started this whole transformation. I'm proud of who I've become. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Now I'm exactly who I was always meant to be. Your grandfather would be proud too. I hope so. I think he'd especially appreciate the chess metaphor. Sometimes you have to sacrifice pieces to win the game. And have you won? I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The same face, but somehow completely different. Stronger, more confident, more genuinely myself than I'd ever been. I've won something better than the game, I said. I've won myself. After I hung up, I sat in my car for a moment, looking out at the city lights below. Tomorrow, I had a board meeting for my Singapore resort, a conference call with my London real estate team, and lunch with a potential business partner who wanted to discuss opportunities in Dubai. But tonight, I was just April Thompson, billionaire businesswoman, sitting in the driveway of her $19 million house, finally comfortable in her own skin. It had taken 26 years and a carefully planned inheritance to get here, but it had been worth every difficult moment. 1 year later, I stood on the deck of my yacht, the Legacy, watching the Portland skyline glide by as we cruised down the Columbia River. The boat wasn't the largest in the marina, but it was perfect for what I needed. A place to entertain business associates, host family gatherings, and sometimes just escape from the complexity of managing a billion-dollar empire. The past year had been transformative in ways I never could have imagined. The public acknowledgments from my family had opened doors I hadn't expected. Portland's business community had embraced me as a major player, leading to investment opportunities I'd never dreamed possible. I now owned a controlling interest in the city's largest hotel chain, 3 residential developments, and a technology company that specialized in maritime logistics. My net worth had grown to almost $2 billion, but more importantly, I'd grown into someone I genuinely respected. The yacht pulled into the harbor, where my Tesla waited, another practical luxury that I'd purchased simply because I wanted it and could afford it. That evening, I had dinner with the entire family at my house. It had become a monthly tradition, these gatherings where we actually talked to each other instead of performing for each other. How are things at the shipping company? I asked Dad as we sat around my dining room table. Incredible. The integration with your other maritime holdings has opened up routes we never could have accessed before. We're actually bidding on some international contracts that would have been impossible under the old structure. And the employees? Happy. Secure. They know they're part of something bigger now. Mom set down her wine glass and looked at me thoughtfully. April, can I ask you something I've been wondering about for months? Of course. Do you forgive us? Really forgive us, not just tolerate us because we're family? I considered the question carefully. I've accepted who you are, and I understand why you acted the way you did. You weren't malicious, you were just blind to possibilities you'd never considered. That's not really answering the question. Forgiveness assumes you did something to me. But actually, you did something for me. Your dismissal forced me to find my own strength. Your assumptions helped me discover my own worth. If you'd seen my potential from the beginning, I might never have learned to see it myself. Jennifer leaned forward. So you're grateful we treated you badly? I'm grateful for the journey it started. Grandpa could have just left me money directly, but instead he gave me something much more valuable, the chance to discover who I really was before the money changed how people saw me. Marcus, who'd been quiet through most of dinner, finally spoke up. April, I need to tell you something. What's that? I've been thinking about what you said about earning respect versus expecting it. And I realized I've never actually earned anything in my life. Everything I have came from inheritance or family connections. What are you thinking of doing about that? I want to work. Really work. Not just show up at some job Dad arranged. Would you consider giving me a chance at one of your companies? Starting at the bottom, earning my way up? I studied his face, looking for signs of entitlement or expectation. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine humility. I'd consider it, but you'd start in the mailroom, literally, and you'd be treated exactly like any other entry-level employee. That's all I'm asking for. After dinner, I walked out onto my terrace with Dad. The city stretched out below us, millions of lights representing millions of lives, millions of dreams. April, he said quietly, I need you to know something. What's that? I'm proud of you. Not because of the money or the success, but because of who you've become. You're stronger than I ever was, smarter than I ever realized, and kinder than I deserved. Dad, let me finish. Your grandfather saw something in you that the rest of us missed. He was right to trust you with his legacy, and he was right to structure things the way he did. You needed to learn your own worth before anyone else could see it. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Thank you. No, thank you. For giving us a chance to know the real you. For forgiving us even when we didn't deserve it. For being better than we taught you to be. Later that night, I sat in my home office reviewing reports from my various properties around the world. Monaco was exceeding all projections. Vegas was planning a major expansion. Singapore was considering a second tower. London was exploring opportunities in sustainable development. My phone chimed with an email from my charitable foundation director. The Robert Thompson Foundation for Educational Excellence had just announced its largest grant yet, $100 million to support STEM education in underfunded schools across the Pacific Northwest. Tomorrow's news would feature photos of me presenting the grant check, standing alongside teachers and administrators who understood that education could change everything for a child who felt overlooked. I opened my laptop and began composing the foundation's press release. At the bottom, I added a personal note. My grandfather taught me that the greatest gifts often come in unexpected packages. Today, we're passing that lesson forward to the next generation of dreamers and achievers. As I typed those words, I could almost hear Grandpa's voice. Sometimes the most overlooked person in the room is the one with the most potential to change everything. He'd been right, as always. I'd spent 26 years being underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked. But that experience had taught me something invaluable. True worth isn't determined by how others see you, it's determined by how you see yourself. Everything else is just details. From my office window, I could see my parents' neighborhood in the distance, the small houses where they were probably reading or watching television before bed. They were good people who'd made incorrect assumptions. The difference was important. I pulled up my calendar for tomorrow. A board meeting for my Pacific Northwest hotel chain, a conference call with potential investors in renewable energy, and lunch with the mayor to discuss affordable housing initiatives. But first, I was having coffee with Charlotte, my former teaching colleague and still my closest friend. We met monthly to talk about everything except business, a reminder of who I'd been before I knew who I was meant to become. I closed my laptop and headed upstairs to the master bedroom, pausing at the window that overlooked the city. 1 year ago, I'd been a teacher who thought she'd inherited an envelope. Tonight, I was a billionaire philanthropist who'd inherited the wisdom to use wealth responsibly. The money had been life-changing, but the real transformation had been learning to value myself. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the children who'd receive scholarships from my foundation, the kids who might feel overlooked or underestimated in their own families. I hoped they'd learn what I'd learned, that sometimes the greatest gift is the journey of discovering your own worth. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more incredible tales of transformation and triumph. Remember, your worth isn't determined by how others see you, it's determined by how you see yourself. Thank you for joining me on April's journey, and never forget that the most powerful inheritance isn't money. It's the knowledge of your own capabilities.